Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Anthony Broom and Chris Ballas on a Thursday. We are in Big Ten season now. Michigan against Rutgers. We'll preview that game. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Make sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube. Like it and hit that thumbs up button if you are excited for Jim Harbaugh's return to the sideline on Saturday. Also, subscribe to our channel here on the Wolverine and head to the Wolverine.com for $1 for your first month premium access. You can get on our message board, discuss with thousands and thousands of Michigan fans, also get all of our insider intel as well. Big Inside the Fort coming on Friday. Fellas, how's it going today? We got a little more juice, it feels like, when we were talking to some players and coaches this week. They all know that these games are a little bit more important, and they're going to be a little bit tougher.
And just for Rutgers, that's the funny part about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like normally you'd be like, oh, well, ho-hum. But it's a step up in competition for what they've seen. And Rutgers is playing solid ball. They got a good defense. I think a solid defense. You know, who knows how good they are. We're going to find out a lot about a lot of teams this week, frankly. So, and Rutgers being one of them, in Michigan. So, of course, maybe not. You know what? I remember a couple of years ago, Rutgers and Michigan. Rutgers played Michigan to a standstill for most of the game there, and then Michigan went on to win the Big Ten, and Rutgers was crappy. So, however, you hope that Michigan will respond against better competition. I think they will. I think having their head coach back means something, fellas. It's like our Touch man, one of our respected posters on the board, said, it's like going into battle without your general, you know, and that's basically what it's been. So excited to see what happens on Saturday.
It's kind of crazy that compared to what we watched the first 3 weeks, it feels like Ohio State week almost. There's just so much more juice. And the slate this weekend in general, we had to kind of gut through last week's slate as college football fans at large. This week's slate, we're going to pick those games later. Incredible. So looking forward to see what Michigan does in their non-conference opener. It finally feels like there's a complete product on the table. We'll discuss all that coming up. But yeah, really excited for conference play and to get this thing rolling.
Yeah, as Anthony mentioned, we will pick some of the top games from around the country. And just, you know, we've had to kind of go through the slate the last couple of weeks and pick out the best games in the Big Ten and around the country. Some of the spreads are 20s and in the 30s. Not this week. We got a bunch of ranked matchups. I think there were only 3 ranked matchups in the first few weeks. And there are 4 ranked matchups in the Pac-12 alone this weekend. But it's plenty of games that we'll talk about going forward. Michigan, of course, at the top of mind. 24-point favorite in this game. Rutgers is 3-0 for the 3rd straight season, but it's the first time they've won 3 straight games against FBS opponents since 2014. Hate to bring that up. Navy, Tulane, and Michigan back then. But they have wins now over Northwestern, Temple, Virginia Tech, combined 65 points in those wins. And they've played Michigan tough over the last 3 years, including leading at halftime last season. We'll get into all this. We'll start with the Michigan offense and what we expect from them. But first, we do want to talk about our fantastic sponsors over at PrizePicks. Football season is back, and there's no better way to enjoy the games than by playing daily fantasy with PrizePicks. You pick 2 to 6 players, predict if they will go more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. At PrizePicks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And all first-time users that deposit and use promo code Wolverine will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100 with PrizePicks, they will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they will give you $50. Again, that's the promo code Wolverine for the 100% instant deposit match. And we made some picks for this week. As always, I can start out with mine. I got, sticking with the Michigan game, a couple Michigan guys, but I got Blake Corum, more than 83.5 rushing yards, and Donovan Edwards, less than 53.5 rushing yards. I don't know how many games that Blake Corum didn't rush for over 100 in the Big Ten season last year. I don't know if there were any other than Ohio State. Maybe Illinois, he was close after the first half. So I got that. And then Donovan Edwards, you know, I think we'll see him have a role, but I just would bet on Blake Corum being the more featured back. What do you guys have this week?
I think he should be, too. Let's be honest. I think he's the better running back at this point. And so I think that's a pretty good pick, frankly. I'm going with Michigan. I like J.J. McCarthy more than 229.5 yards in this game. I think Rutgers is going to kind of do what some of the other teams have done and say, hey, we're going to take away the run. I don't think they're going to play Michigan's receivers straight up. I think McCarthy's going to have a big game as a result. Plus, I think he's hungry after last week's embarrassment. And you could tell he was embarrassed in the post game. So And then I believe it was Talia Tagovailoa, 285.5 against Michigan State. I think he's gonna pick them apart. I think Michigan State's gonna probably go in the tank here and not play with a whole lot of I want to out there on Saturday. So expect that to happen more than.
I like that. Yeah.
It's another week full of quarterback picks for me. Bo Nix, more than 312.5 passing yards this week against Colorado. I think the shine comes off of Coach Prime and the Buffaloes a little bit this week. JJ McCarthy, I'm with Chris, more than 229.5 passing yards. Rutgers is going to gear up to stop the run like everyone else has. And I think the blueprint is kind of out there for defenses that, your best shot at slowing down Michigan might be hoping that JJ McCarthy makes a mistake against you. And I don't think it'll happen this week after what was a pretty uncharacteristic performance last week out of him. And then we've got one of those good old-fashioned Big Ten bar fights in Happy Valley on Saturday night, Penn State and Iowa. I have Drew Aller throwing more than 0.5 interceptions in that game. We know the Iowa defense loves to turn teams over, so it's going to take a turnover to give them a chance to win that game. So I think that will happen.
I like the pick. So again, go to prizepicks.com, download the app today. Also, if you want, use the promo code Wolverine for an instant deposit match up to $100. Let's stick right there with JJ. Anthony, you talked about it, and Chris, you picked him as well. Feels like a nice bounce back spot potentially for JJ this week, and coming out after what happened a week ago with 3 interceptions for the first time in his career. Blake Corum seemed like they've been kind of getting him going. We could see a reconfigured offensive line again after what transpired in the third quarter last week when they insert Ladarius Henderson there, move Carson Barnhart over to the right side. Rutgers defense have been playing decently here early on, but they've played a couple Power 5 teams, Northwestern, Virginia Tech. Neither of them expected to be very good at all, and Temple is supposed to be okay, and they absolutely handle them. So I thought that was a good sign if you're Rutgers. But your guys' thoughts on this Michigan offense coming into this game?
I think that Temple game was 13-7 in the fourth quarter, wasn't it? So I think they pulled away late, and I'm not quite sure. I didn't see. I was watching it, but I want to go back and take a look at that. I don't know how much they completely handled them, but it's point taken nonetheless. To me, yeah, a lot to prove, like I said, for both teams. And I don't Rutgers doesn't have Michigan's personnel, but what they want to do is they want to shorten the game. And as we saw a couple of years ago, when they started running a little bit on Michigan had a couple of injuries on there. They shortened the game and they made it a nail biter there at the end. So one of the keys to the game that I wrote this week was you need to take advantage of your every opportunity you have as an offense. You can't miss an opportunity and then all of a sudden it's a 7-6 game like late in the second quarter or something like that, because you're just not getting as many possessions anymore with the new rules. So and if you turn the ball over like JJ McCarthy did. So I have no doubt he's going to come out and play a much better game. It's going to be interesting to see what they throw at McCarthy though. And there were times that he didn't have anywhere to go with the ball against Bowling Green. And part of that was Bowling Green's schemes. Credit to them. It's like Scott Loeffler, their head coach, said, we kind of piggyback off them and we copy their schemes. So give them credit for the way they disguise the defenses. I think Greg Schiano is a very good defensive coach, so expect some of that too. But I just think that Michigan's going to have. I think this last game kind of lit a fire under them, and getting Harbaugh back, I expect to see their best game of the year.
I would hope so. I think that sort of alluded to this earlier. It feels like all the ingredients in place now. The main ingredient being Jim Harbaugh, where you would think that this team should come out and have its best performance of the year on Saturday. You look at the front that Rutgers will throw out there. It's a 4-man front. It's either a 4-2-5 or a 4-3. You're going to get a lot of looks that you're used to seeing. No weird fronts, no weird looks. And yeah, they're going to gear up to stop the run, and you're going to have to kind of take whatever they give you. But, when I look at this Michigan offense right now, I think that it was late in last week's game, but that switch they made with the tackles, Ladarius Henderson on the left side, Carson Barnhart flipping over to the right side, I think that's the group that I'm kind of surprised they didn't come out of camp with. Wanted to see what Miles Hinton could do if he could kind of capture that lightning in the bottle from camp. And there's 3 games of film that suggests that won't be the case. So they make the switch. It's not a very big sample size, but Henderson has done extremely well in pass protection. I think he's a more natural fit on that left side than Carson Barnhart is. So And any deficiencies that Barnhart may have had on that left side, I think will kind of be offset by him being in a more comfortable spot on that right side of the offensive line. So again, I don't know that this is going to be one of those like pick your score games. Rutgers is as deep defensively as they've been. A guy like Aaron Lewis, I think one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the conference. Michigan's going to have its work cut out for them, but I almost feel like last week felt like the wake-up call that I thought was coming this week. So yeah, I do expect a clean game, and I expect them to be able to take whatever Rutgers gives them and move the ball down the field accordingly.
Kind of like Maryland last year, right, AB, when you came out and you had no competition, and then all of a sudden the level of competition goes up, and they didn't seem to adjust to it until late in that game. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and a turnover early doesn't help either, and that's kind of what Michigan has to avoid. They had a fumble in that game, and you can't make those mistakes if you want to absolutely cruise to victory. But Rutgers so far, not that these numbers mean a ton because of competition around the country, including with Rutgers, but 7th in scoring defense, 20th in total defense, 12th against the run, 57th against the pass, but 12th against the pass in yards per throw. And they've gotten turnovers. They've gotten some interceptions early on this season against some bad teams. But going back to that Temple game, it was 13-0 at halftime. And something, talking to Aaron Breitman, who covers the team over there for the Scarlet Faithful, he was saying the third quarters have been kind of interesting for Rutgers so far, where they have these leads and then they get really conservative, run the football. They have 8 punts on 9 drives in the third quarter so far this season. They let the teams back in, but then they've buried teams in the fourth quarter. So, not sure that script's necessarily super relevant for this game, but I guess it does kind of tell or give a little bit more context to how those games played out. And another thing he was telling me too is they finally have that Big Ten depth. Maybe not the talent of a Michigan or whatever, and not many teams do, but they finally have enough guys that they can rotate in that Greg Schiano's comfortable with, which they haven't had on the defensive side yet since he's come back in 2020. Let's move over to the Michigan defense and talk about what we expect out of a Rutgers offense that has been really terrible under Schiano so far in his tenure, but has shown some improvement this year again. Early on, you see Gavin Wimsatt. He has improved his completion percentage by 7%, all the way up to a whopping 51.5%. It's still second to last in the Big Ten among qualifying quarterbacks, but the run game has improved. Kyle Managi, reigning Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week, he had 143 yards, 3 touchdowns against Virginia Tech, leads the Big Ten with 357 rushing yards, 5'9", 210, averages over 4 yards per rush after contact. Which is 8th in the Power 5, 2nd in the Big Ten. They're going to try to run the ball. They are going to snap the ball with 5 seconds to go on the play clock, shorten this game, as you said earlier, Chris. And that's, even with these, teams they've been playing, that's what they've been doing. So it's going to make third downs on both sides of the ball for Michigan, I think, really important. You got to get off the field, get the ball back in the hands of your offense if you're Michigan's defense. And on the flip side, going back to the offense, you got to stay on the field, convert on third downs, because these days with the clock rule, you never know when you're going to get the ball back.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get out to a 2-score lead, in that first quarter, early in the second quarter. And then you're not biting your nails and thinking, man, this is just painful to watch, right? So that to me is key. And tackling, I didn't think they tackled all that well last week against Bowling Green, and that allowed Bowling Green to keep some drives alive that normally they wouldn't have. It's nitpicking when you hold a team to 6 points. And, if you look at what Bowling Green, what nobody accomplished in the non-conference. 173 of their 246 rushing yards against Michigan have come in the fourth quarter when the backups and the third stringers are in there. So nobody's running the ball on them, but I think you're going to see Rutgers try to get a little more creative in the running game, probably run some formations that Michigan hasn't seen before, maybe run Wimsatt a little bit more on designed runs. And it's not going to be one of those games, again, where you can just pin your ears back, as Mike Elston said, and Jesse Minter, Michigan's defensive coaches, and get after the quarterback. You've got to make that pocket collapse on him. And I think that's going to be the key here, is keep him in that pocket and make him make some bad throws, because we know he's got it in him. We've seen it. Yes. He is not a great throwing quarterback. So I like Michigan to stop the run here, even without Mason Graham, who will be out this game, as we alluded to earlier in this week, and which is unfortunate. And everybody says, well, we got depth there. People underestimate how good Mason Graham really is in that area. So it'll be up to those other guys to step up. I think they will, and keep those linebackers clean. But yeah, got to avoid those third and shorts, because that's where it gets tricky, and that's where these drives go 6-7 minutes, and then you've got yourself a ball game into the second half.
I think we're going to see Rutgers punt the ball a lot in this game.
Good.
And maybe they're playing, maybe it's, field position thing, and they're giving Michigan's offense trouble. But I mean, you look at Gavin Wimsatt, for all the discussion, he's much improved. And this is a guy who's just greatly improved his accuracy. Then he's completing 51.5% of his throws. Man, listen, I think that with this Michigan run wall, as they like to call it, with Mason Graham or not, I mean, Mason Graham is a big loss, but you have Chris Jenkins and you have Kenneth Grant, who's been arguably their best defensive tackle at this point in the year. Cam Good has played well. Rayshon Benny has played well. Guys like Braden McGregor, Jalen Harrell play the run extremely well. I just don't see how they're going to be able to get in those short yardage situations unless they do kind of get Wimsatt going with, some of the creative stuff in the run game. And this is a game that's about that run wall and about discipline. You're going to have to stay disciplined because they're going to try and do some of the design runs with Wimsatt. They're going to try and, throw Michigan off balance and, hold the ball until the last possible second before they snap it. This is about discipline and tackling. And if nothing else, Greg Schiano teams will force you to play an extremely disciplined, well-conditioned, and focused brand of football against them. And the Michigan defense, outside of a few nitpicks that you alluded to, Chris, I think has been outstanding these first 3 weeks. And maybe they get some reinforcements on the back end this week. We'll see what happens there. But I just don't, Gavin Wimsatt is going to have the game of his life. And we've seen crazy things happen before, but, I just don't see a lot of evidence that he's capable of that in a building with 110,000 screaming people against him. So, yeah, I do expect a clean performance from Michigan's defense, and maybe it's not always pretty. Maybe it's a little gritty, but we know that group is capable of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not I'll add too, it's not just the run wall either. They're going to throw a lot of quick passes, and it goes back to your point, Chris, about tackling. You got to tackle in the open field against these guys. They run some misdirection, that sort of thing, even though it's a new offensive coordinator. It seems like he's clicked with Wimsatt from, what, Aaron Breitman was telling me earlier this week. But Gavin Wimsatt, going into the game last year, you didn't really have to worry too much about him running because of his bum ankle a year ago, but already 28 rushes for 144 yards, over double what he had last year. And a lot of them are on design runs, only 5 of his carries for 18 yards on scrambles. So they are going to draw some stuff up for him. And then important to note as well, on the Rutgers offensive line, they've got 8 guys that have played 49 or more snaps. They've rotated a lot. The right tackle, Tyler Needham, is out. It's been a revolving door there with 2 guys splitting time. So I know, people are in it's not nothing that, Michigan is having to try to figure out what their best 5 is right now at this point in the year. But I think Rutgers in a much worse spot, not only with its personnel, but with kind of the rotation that they have going on. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about with the Michigan defense is just the potential return of Will Johnson and Rod Moore, and, what kind of impact that could have on this defense. Because, I think if those 2 are back and they get going and they're playing how they're capable, teams like Rutgers are going to have an even more tough, time to move the football on this defense. I think you may not need them this week. You may not need them next week, although you'd love to have them on the road. But you want to get these guys going, because at some point this defense is going to get tested. But your guys' thoughts on their potential return?
Yeah, we'll have more on that tomorrow and Inside the Fort. But I think, as Jesse Minter said, Michigan's defensive coordinator yesterday, really, really close, really close. So this is not a Nikai Hillgreen situation, guys, where, oh gosh, he tweaked the hammy again or something like that, and he's going to be out for the entire year. Just not happening. So. So again, we'll talk about that more tomorrow, but I expect them to get closer and closer, and for these guys to get healthier and healthier. And once they do, man, it's going to be hard. Think about having a lockdown corner out there as part of a defense that's already been fantastic, and then a safety that's the most instinctual that I've seen at Michigan in the last 40 years in Rod Moore. So excited to see those guys back in action.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those guys, you could make the argument maybe Michigan's 2 best defensive players, ? You could have that conversation. So to have them back again, I don't know that that's something. If you want to take one more week with them, I think you can get away with it. But I feel like this is about the time of year, the last 2 seasons, where we've seen this group start to hit its stride and kind of hone in on what his identity is. And going on the road for the first time next weekend, I really feel like that's kind of when you want all troops available if possible. We know Mason Graham is banged up, and we probably won't see him for a couple weeks. But other than that, those 2 guys, and people have asked too, what was the non-conference missing? And it was obviously Jim Harbaugh, but also we haven't seen literally 2 of maybe their 3 best defenders on the field, hardly at all. And in Rod Moore's case, not at all. So this team can get even better and is going to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah. And they still gave up 2-3 long passes, so they've still fared well back there, but I think it could truly take the step to elite, with those guys in there. And it seems like almost the opposite of an Akai Hill-Green situation, because I feel like they're trying to make sure these guys are 100% before they're back out there, instead of it lingering, because they can't go back out there. Especially maybe in Will Johnson's case, he was working with the ones and warm-ups last week and then didn't go. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And obviously we'll have the updates over at thewolverine.com inside the fort there tomorrow on Friday. So make sure to get your subscription now, $1 for your first month. Let's talk about our friends over at GameTime before we get into our predictions for this game. We're brought to you today by GameTime, the exclusive ticketing partner of the Wolverine, created by fans for fans. GameTime is the ticketing app that makes it easier than ever to score last-minute deals on tickets to sports, concerts, and shows. And they will guarantee the lowest price. Football is back. Definitely going to get to a Lions game at some point this year. Chris, I think you may be going this weekend, and I know you did use GameTime. Is that right?
I did. Saved $20 and got great seats for a lot less than I would have gotten on any other service. I can promise you that. And that's not just me talking. So it's section 122, baby, row 32.
Let's go. Yeah, and GameTime has the best seats and the best deals, so there's no better combination than that. It's all possible with the GameTime app. Biggest last-minute price drops can be found on the seats you thought you could never buy. They'll even credit you 110% of the seat price if you can find a better deal elsewhere. I've talked about it in the past, but multiple family members of mine have used GameTime this year for Michigan games. So if you're looking for tickets for this weekend, one of the 4 remaining home games, then make sure to go and do that. And you can use the promo code Wolverine, as Chris did, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, the promo code Wolverine for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
I can confirm, though, that they do not give you your money back if the Lions lose. So that's the only negative. And but nobody does that. So I'm sorry, I'm scarred, Anthony. I know that those are your boys, man. But I just have a bad
They're your
feeling.
boys too.
They're my boys, and that's why I can put them down all I want to. Because damn it, they've sucked so long, and they've sucked me back in. So guess what? They'll probably lose 2 in a row at home, and I'll be there to see the second one. But anyway, thanks to GameTime for allowing me to be there at a nice price.
Well, yeah, we'll talk to our
that's section 122 if you want to dump a beer on them or something.
That's fine. I'll open my mouth as you do. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to talk to our rep over at GameTime, see if we can get refunds if the Lions lose. But
it's not happening, folks. I was joking, just to be perfectly clear.
No doubt.
That's not in the copy.
True.
Right, it's not.
You got to put that disclaimer in there. Yeah, use the promo code Wolverine, $20 off. Terms apply. That is in the copy. Let's get into our predictions for this game. We'll start with the offensive player of the game, and I mentioned it too when we were talking about some of the PrizePicks projections. But I do think Blake Corum, they're going to lean on him a lot in this game, as they should, and as they usually do, really, over the last year plus. But I'm going to go with a little bit of an off the wall pick, and not off the wall, but a little unusual pick, just because I want to give the guys up front a little bit of love. I want to give this one and predict that Drake Nugent's going to have a really good game. Rutgers is creative up front. He's going to have to play well. They tilt their nose guard in there in the A gap and, try to make it tough on the center. And I think he's going to respond well in this game. Jim Harbaugh said, I think after the UNLV game, that he's been their best offensive lineman to this point. And, there hasn't been a ton of, some people were criticizing a couple things and a couple plays really weren't his fault. But it's been pretty smooth sailing in there at center so far. And I think he's going to step up to the plate again this week.
Did you have a score? Are we predicting?
The offensive player of the game score?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Offensive player of the game. Well, I saw final score predictions up there. I thought you were doing them both at the same time. So, offensive player of the game, I'm going with J.J. McCarthy to have a great bounce back game. I think he's going to come out slinging it and run some really nice play action on Saturday. I'm not so sure that Rutgers has what it takes in the secondary to deal with a guy like McCarthy, and I expect him to play his best game of the year. And that's saying something.
Blake Corum all the way back this weekend. It was about this time last year. Similar stats, through the early part of this year, 37 carries, 254 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6.9 yards per carry. That's nice. We'd like to see that in those first 3 games. And then he comes out in that opener against Maryland, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns. To predict that would be crazy, but I think that it's clear to me he's Michigan's top running back right now. And I think that with that, what I believe to be a stabilizing move on the offensive line, I think that Michigan's going to come out with something to prove this week, and Blake Corum's at the forefront of that. So Blake Corum is my pick.
I like it. I like both picks. Defensive player of the game, I'm going to go with Junior Colson. I think Rutgers is going to try to run the football and shorten the game. It just feels like one of those games where Junior Colson cleans up with 11, 12 tackles or something like that. I know that's what percentage of plays will that be, especially if they try to shorten the game. But I think Junior Colson is going to have a nice game in there, stopping the run, making some tackles on some of those short passes.
I think it's a great pick. And I'll go with Mike Barrett. I think you're going to see him make a couple plays in the passing game as well. And we saw him last year against Rutgers, right, with a couple of interceptions, and he'll be key there. So Mike Barrett owns Rutgers, and he's going to own them again this year.
Well, if Gavin Wimsatt has to throw or make some kind of play in order for Rutgers to be in this game, I feel like that means an interception or two is going to be up for grabs. And I'm going with a New Jersey kid to grab it and have another good game. Keon Saab is my pick for this week. So I feel like even as the secondary gets healthier, we're going to see him have a pretty substantial role in that safety rotation. And I think Saab plays a real nice game this weekend.
I like it. Final score, our staff predictions by the time you listen to this are up over at thewolverine.com. So go read that article. As always, we'll have Doug Skeen's pick in there, John Borton's pick, as well as all of ours. Tough one here. I went with 35-10 Michigan. I do think Rutgers maybe breaks a long run or hits a big play to set themselves up and score 1 touchdown. But I don't see much more than that. And I think Michigan might get a couple turnovers themselves. I think Michigan's going to be able to move the football. So I got 35-10. And I do want to note, too, we didn't mention it earlier, but Rutgers has a pretty decent kicker. He hit a 51-yarder earlier in the year. He was Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week, had a 40-something in that same game. So, he might be able to get them on the board with a field goal. So I'm going to go 35-10.
Yeah, I'm going to go 30-13. I think 3 field goals, 3 touchdowns for Michigan. I think Rutgers, because they have the good kicker, they'll get a long field goal or 2 to go with their touchdown, but Michigan wins relatively comfortably.
For whatever reason, 41 has been the number in my brain since the year started, so I'm sticking with it. I'm going to say Michigan wins 41-14. I think that the head honcho being back this week and the offense coming off the performance that it had, I expect this team to come out with its hair on fire, even if it gets punched in the mouth a little bit early and our message board goes crazy. Michigan wins big, and I think this will be in my bold predictions tomorrow when that comes out. Michigan will have a defensive or special teams touchdown in this game.
I like it. All right, well, let's move on to No Man Knows the Future, final segment. And as we said at the top, an absolutely elite slate this weekend. It's one of those college football weekends that you think about, in April and May and June, and you're like, all right, when's the football season coming? This is kind of what you talk about. Last week, maybe you go, you do the cider thing. ABN, you did that a couple weeks ago, right? You go to the, you go do the whole girlfriend thing and that whole thing. I don't really,
Which I'm happy to do, by the way. On the record.
Fair. Yeah. Okay. She must listen then. But this is one of those weekends where I know we'll be working and, it's a little bit tougher, but you stay in your house or you go to the bar, you go to a friend's house and you are watching football pretty much wall to wall all day long. Let's start out with one in the ACC, Florida State at Clemson. Clemson, a 2-point underdog at home over under 55. Give me Clemson in this game. I just think them being at home, them getting written off after the Duke game, them getting a little more comfortable with their offense too under new coordinator Garrett Riley. Sometimes it takes a few weeks. I think they're going to pull this off, and they could meet again towards the end of the year there.
Yeah, it's kind of their season, right? After what happened in the first game. So playing at home, Florida State, boy, they were lucky to win last week, frankly. So
yeah.
I like Clemson as well. I like Clemson to win this game.
I think that Clemson and Dabo Swinney are two of the biggest frauds, one collective fraud in this current landscape of college football, and I expect Florida State to roll.
Wow.
So going Florida State.
I wouldn't hurt my feelings, I'll be honest. I don't mind being wrong. So people do not bet your houses on these picks. It's not like we sit there and have a machine here that we run these through. Maybe Clay does. Clay's plays, but not the rest of us.
Trust me, I do not.
No man fades the future.
Right, exactly.
It's true. Yeah, trust me, I've done okay so far this year on what I've actually bet responsibly, but that is the other shoe is going to drop at some point. I'm pretty sure. Colorado at Oregon. Oregon, a 21-point favorite over under 68.5. Oregon rolls. Oregon absolutely rolls. Colorado hasn't played a team yet that's going to be as physical and really is as good as that, and I think that they roll.
Yeah, something like 49-28 or something like that. So it'll be close to that spread, but I'm going to go with Oregon to cover. And you know what? If they don't, and if Colorado plays them tough, then Colorado will have earned my respect.
Yeah, and for all the talk of how well Deion Sanders has done, this is just a leagues ahead of what he's had to face and what they've had to face so far this year. Shedeur Sanders is that dude. I think if they're going to stay in this game, it has everything to do with him, but not enough horses yet. I think Oregon rolls in this one.
Yeah, I think he's going to get hit a lot too, but he is fantastic. Ole Miss at Alabama. Alabama 6.5-point favorite. Over under is 55.5. I got Ole Miss. I don't know. Texas comes in there. They did what they did, and then Alabama shows up flat at USF last week. I don't know. It just feels like something's not right at Alabama. They're switching their quarterback again. I'm going to go with Lane Kiffin. I know you don't usually go with the former Saban assistant, but we saw one in Sark come in and win. I'm going to go with another one to at least cover against Alabama.
Yeah, something we didn't mention about the last game too, Travis Hunter being out, right? So
yeah,
that's gonna really hurt Colorado in that game as well. So for some reason, I'm not going to bet against Alabama here. I think Nick Saban's going to right the ship here. I think they're going to come out angry playing an SEC foe. And I think that Nick Saban's going to have something to prove and that he takes it out on Lane Kiffin. I like Alabama to cover.
I like Ole Miss here. There's something about this Alabama team that has like a 2017 Michigan energy to it from the quarterback stuff. I don't think, and this is a little bit different from that situation, but it's weird to see them struggle at quarterback. And then also they're just not as good up front as they have been, both on the offensive and defensive lines. So I like Ole Miss to cover that number. They might win outright, but Alabama looks like a 3-loss team to me right now.
This isn't really included in the elite slate, but Maryland at Michigan State. It's interesting given what's going on. It's a division game. Michigan State 7.5-point underdogs at home, over under 52.5. Embarrassed last week against Washington, and I don't think Maryland's going to embarrass them, but I do think they'll win by a couple scores, and that has them covering the number.
Yeah, I think that probably last week took the wind out of their sails up there in East Lansing. And, once Mel is officially fired, then that thing's going to just absolutely fall apart. And I just think guys are probably already eyeing their next opportunities, frankly, fair or not. So I like Maryland to cover as well.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan State cover. I guess just for entertainment's sake, I'll say that's going to happen because this is kind of their last-ditch effort. Like when Mel is officially fired next week, because the letter that came out this week was the notice of an intent to fire with him having 7 days to respond. The portal's open, and I think that there will be an exodus of guys. So I think this is kind of their last-ditch effort. Maryland is classic for playing down to teams. The last 2 weeks went down 14-0 early, both to Virginia and Charlotte as well that
Charlotte.
kind of hit the accelerator. So I don't know. I feel like this is kind of it. This is kind of it for Michigan State. So I'll pick them to cover, but I least confident pick of the week.
Yeah, and some guys that may want to leave have one more game to play in before they lose their eligibility. So it's really going to get interesting, I think, in East Lansing. Ohio State at Notre Dame, game of the day, I would say. Night game, Notre Dame, 3-point underdog in South Bend, over under 55.5. And it's kind of interesting with a matchup like this. I mean, Ohio State, one, they don't usually have a spread that's this close unless they're in the playoff. But two, they typically have the better quarterback in just about every big game they play. So you can say, oh, someone's going to upset them. And Michigan has been underdogs and beaten them the last 2 years. But this is the first time where I think the other team has the better signal caller. I'm going to go with Sam Hartman and Notre Dame to win at home.
Yeah, it's just a tough one, right? I think
really tough.
It is. I think Ohio State's going to run the ball on them a little bit, and I think they're going to bully them a little bit. And that defense of theirs has played pretty well, as you noted last week. So for some reason, I'm picking Ohio State. This is my least optimistic pick of the week, but for some reason, I just think the Buckeyes are going to pull it out up there.
I'll go Buckeyes as well, on the heels of, Notre Dame might have the best quarterback, but I think Ohio State will have the best player on the field in Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he has a big game under the lights, and maybe Michigan struggles a little bit at times with Rutgers or doesn't look the way that the fans want them to. Then Ohio State wins, and then we can kick off a several-week existential crisis on the board in the lead up to the Ohio State game.
Oh, God. Okay. I'm going to prepare myself for that. Last one. Another interesting one, Iowa at Penn State. Penn State 15-point favorites at home. This is the whiteout game, over under a whopping 40 points. Iowa's kind of had their number. I know it's a different type of Penn State team. Didn't love what I saw from Penn State. I know they forced a bunch of turnovers. That Illinois quarterback is god-awful. No offense to him if he's listening. And I think that they're going to get some resistance with this Iowa defense, which I like. I don't know how much Iowa is going to be able to score, but I think Iowa keeps it within the 15. I like that. It's outside of 2 scores, so they'll keep it fairly close.
I think I read that they have a ton of injuries, if I'm not mistaken. A couple running backs, maybe a tight end down. So
yeah, Lestray's out.
Yeah, so I don't like Iowa to score a whole lot in this game. I see something like 23-6 game or a 21-6. Of course, with the 15, it kind of matters, right? Which one I pick. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Penn State to cover just barely in an ugly game.
Well, back in our PrizePicks segment, I picked Drew Aller to throw more than half an interception, and I'll take it a step further and say Iowa makes this a game by not only turning him over, but also returning it for a touchdown, which is something they specialize in. So I'm going to go Hawkeyes here, lest we forget, Cade McNamara has won in that building before. So not saying they'll win, but I think they are going to put up a fight, and we're going to find out what both of those teams are made of.
Yeah, and Cade finally has a defense that can score, so that's nice. So that's the slate. There are also many other good games, so I know everybody will be kind of glued to the TV. But noon on Saturday, Michigan and Rutgers. That's the real big game of the weekend. And make sure to get all of your coverage over at thewolverine.com. $1 for your first month for new subscribers. Again, like this video if you're excited about Jim Harbaugh's return to the sideline. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we will see everyone next time.